Some scientists, climate scientists, are finding that working with nature could be more effective because sometimes you just have to leave it to the beavers.
Some researchers, especially climate researchers, are finding that it's perhaps much better to work with nature rather than against it, because sometimes you just have to let the beavers do their thing. Recently, Canada transplanted hundreds of beavers into its withering wetlands, not as a rescue effort, but as a radical ecological experiment. Beavers possess the incredible capacity to reshape landscapes and offer crucial ecosystem services. On the surface, this action could be described as an eccentric environmental prank, but researchers are convinced that within 5 years, it will turn around decades of environmental loss. Actually, most see it as a radical move in re-establishing the role of beavers in conservation. If predictions prove accurate, the result won't just alter Canada's destiny, but potentially shift the way the entire globe is thinking about restoring ecosystems. Beaver complexes are particularly hardy, with nearly unparalleled resistance to drought. But why beavers and why now? How could some tiny animals prevail where billions of government dollars have not? The reason is in an overlooked crisis, the demise of Canada's wetlands, and the reemergence of nature's first engineers. Canada's wetlands were for centuries some of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. Massive marshes, bogs, swamps, and fens dominated the landscape from the tundra of the north to the plains of the south, serving as natural water purification plants, flood control devices, and animal nurseries. But within a matter of decades, these lifelines were disappearing. As many as 70% of wetlands are gone in southern Canada alone, sacrificed to urban sprawl, industrial agriculture, and large-scale drainage schemes to render land useful. Ponds were filled in with parking lots by bulldozers. Marshes were drained into fields by canals, and wetland forests were cut down for crops and subdivisions. The end result was tragic. Areas once chock full of frogs, fish, birds, and moose became cracked, barren ground. This was not merely the loss of beauty, but a loss of functionality. Wetlands are the kidneys of nature, filtering out pollutants, soaking up heavy rains to avoid flooding, and sequestering enormous amounts of carbon in deep peat soils that cool the world. Absent them, communities experience more severe summer droughts, more devastating spring floods, and filthier water every day. Warning signs piled up, water levels fell, plants dried up, and salamander to duck, moose, and even beaver species disappeared or plummeted. Scientists blew the whistle, warning that in one generation Canada might lose much of its freshwater biodiversity, while peatlands drained turned from climate buffer to climate contributors. Artificial repair would run into billions, so Canada opted for something new. Rather than depend on technology alone, they used biology by bringing back beavers. What started as a modest experiment soon ballooned into one of the greatest environmental turnarounds of recent times. The beaver, the native ecosystem engineer of North America, had been almost exterminated in the 1800s with the fur trade. Its numbers annihilated, its dams blown up, and its place in nature lost. Wetlands dried up, rivers flowed more bitter, and the beaver's absence was barely felt. For decades, they were actually considered pests, accused of clogging culverts, flooding fields, and disrupting infrastructure. However, in time, researchers observed that where beavers lived on or recolonized, ecosystems started to mend. Ponds were reformed, birds came back, frogs croaked in the evening, and life thrived. Not through human planning or dollars, but due to a single tough species. Their dams dammed up swift streams, dispersed water over floodplains, retained sediment, filtered out pollutants, and formed productive habitats that attracted frogs, fish, birds, deer, and moose. What was once treated as a pest was now hailed as a keystone solution. It revolutionized conservation thinking. Persecuted previously, beavers became the symbol of nature's strength. Provinces such as Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia started amending legislation and people's attitudes, and new studies demonstrated that nature's wetlands, created by beavers, were not only superior, but also significantly less expensive compared to man-made ones. Sometimes, one beaver dam performed better than thousands of dollars worth of construction. Canada soon came to welcome its lost architects, initiating rewilding projects to preserve current populations as well as bring them back where they previously had lived. This was not merely about rescuing beavers, but about rebalancing entire systems. The conservationists saw this return as the dawn of genuine ecological transformation. That prompted a revolutionary new question. If wild beavers could inadvertently repair ecosystems, what would happen if we intentionally put them into the wetlands that most needed them? That concept sparked a bold experiment, moving hundreds of beavers to degraded ecosystems, hoping that in 5 years they might do what billions in government expenditures had not. Although the program initially met opposition and controversy, it was one of the most audacious moves yet toward reversing environmental degeneration, driven not by technology, but by the humble determination of the beaver. The concept of relocating beavers to rescue Canada's dying wetlands had been straightforward on paper, but in reality, nothing could have been further from a truth. The moment the ambitious project took off, it encountered barriers from all sides, from nature, from humans, and even from Canada's history. Farmers, landowners, and even certain municipalities had regarded beavers as nuisance animals for decades. They tended to flood fields, clog culverts, and destroy property. Thus, when the government and conservationists started talking about intentionally relocating beavers, most Canadians were baffled or downright opposed. Reversing this attitude soon became a priority, early struggle. To do so, conservationists had to conduct public education campaigns, stage town hall meetings, and provide real-world proof that beavers could accomplish what billions of dollars in infrastructure couldn't: restore natural waterways and blunt climate extremes. It was a time-consuming process, but gradually, attitudes did change, particularly following instances of droughts and flooding, which unveiled just how vulnerable the land had become without beavers and their efficient water management. The message was an easy one. We're running out of time, and nature may be our only choice. Another problem was trapping and moving live beavers. Trapping and relocating dogs or deer was not a complicated procedure. Moving beavers was not an easy process. These animals are smart, powerful, and territorial. They were caught alive with the help of trained experts, humane traps, and proper timing. As beavers are the most active during nights and do not handle stress very well, the process was even more complex. After the capture, the second issue was transportation. Some beavers were transported between provinces, and others had to be brought into deep wilderness regions with no road connections. In those instances, helicopters were employed, which accumulated expense and posed logistical challenges in the form of weather delays and elevation restrictions. Coordination of all this over large expanses entailed a lot of planning and cooperation. Far more challenging than getting them around was identifying wetlands that were still viable environments for life. Not all wetlands were prepared to receive a beaver. Actually, most of the locations for reintroducing them were already seriously degraded. Some were arid, devoid of trees and shrubs to feed on and construct dams with, or had been contaminated through years of farming runoff. Releasing beavers there without preparation was a death warrant. That is why, prior to any beaver being released, ecologists needed to make full evaluations, monitoring water flow, vegetation, and balance of the ecosystem. This procedure hindered the project a great deal because appropriate locations were fewer